Councillors, this is the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet meeting. This meeting will be broadcast live to YouTube and will be capable of repeated viewing. The entirety of the meeting will be filmed, except for confidential or exempt items. If you attend the meeting in person, you will be deemed to have consented to being filmed and that the images and sound recordings could be used for webcasting and training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Item 1, apologies for absence.
None received.
Thank you. Declarations of interest by councillors. MCA 19/20 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of August. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Thank you.
Just need a show of hands. I'm moving a second, no show of hands.
Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Flatman. And a show of hands, please. Thank you. To receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received.
Item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or the Joint Audit and Standards Committee.
There were none.
Thank you. Item 7, forthcoming decisions list. There's a hard copy that's been made available.
Just for noting.
It's just for noting. Has anybody got any comments? No? Thank you, councillors. Item 8, MCA 19/21, the corporate plan. As colleagues on the Cabinet are aware, we have been working on a cross-party basis with our Cabinet colleagues at BABA to review the existing joint strategic plan before it expires in 2020. This work and the principles we have developed to guide the evolution of the corporate plan are set out in Appendix A. The senior leadership team have been supporting us in this work, and it has also been significantly informed by officers from across both councils. I'm therefore really proud now to be presenting this new joint corporate plan 2019 to 2027 for recommendation onto full council. Of course, the nature and role of district councils has not fundamentally changed. The new corporate plan therefore reflects more of an evolution rather than a revolution. It does, however, provide a more stretching joint vision for the future of our areas and is designed to enable us to address the challenges and seize the opportunities facing our districts and our councils for the foreseeable future. The revised mission and new mission statement will ensure that we provide more confident leadership of our places through greater place-based working. Our interconnected strategic priorities are now firmly enshrined as being the environment, our economy, housing, well-being, our customers and our communities. Finally, by embedding our newly adopted values within the corporate plan, we are more deeply rooting our organisation in what we believe in, genuinely caring about our residents and places and getting stuff done for people. A visualisation of the revised corporate plan is contained within the report, but I have asked that the Chief Executive provides a more detailed PowerPoint presentation when this comes forward for debate at Council. I therefore take great pleasure in moving the recommendation at paragraph 3.1 that the Cabinet recommends the draft corporate plan 2019 to 2027 to Council, as visually represented in paragraph 4.5, to replace the refreshed Joint Strategic Plan 2016 to 2020. And I call for a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm very happy to second this.
Thank you, Councillor Brewster. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just got some questions on paragraphs 8.1 and 8.2. The development of the corporate plan has been informed by the engagement and consultation that has taken place. Could I ask with whom at Mid-Suffolk, in terms of councillors, other than the administration, what other consultation has there been and in what form? And also in 8.2 you say there has not therefore been any direct consultation with the public. Has there been any indirect consultation with the public or any direct consultation with anybody else? And I have one other query, and that's on 10.1, where you say there are no immediate environmental implications. Well, I would have hoped that adopting a corporate plan would have significant environmental implications, hopefully positive ones.
The public has not been consulted on this. The cabinets, the joint cabinets for Baber and Mid-Suffolk have all been consulted and contributed to this plan. And on the environmental implications, of course there's going to be implications, but we're not in a position to monitor those until the environment strategy and the task force come back to us with their recommendations. And this is a living document. It will progress as the life of the council changes over the next 4 years. Councillor Eban.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a document that's going to last for 8 years, 2019 to 2027. It's been agreed by 7 Conservative members in Mid-Suffolk and has had no input at all from anybody other than those 7 Conservatives. Given the small number of people that is doing that, I've got grave concerns that it actually suits what the council is trying to achieve. In the past, we've had strategic plans where we've had workshops, we've had roundtable sessions with councillors across Baber and Mid-Suffolk. We've worked with our Baber colleagues, and amongst all of us, we have produced a very effective working relationship that at the end of that result has been able to be modified by the Conservative administration as they saw fit, but at least it had the consultation, and no member of this council was able then to say I wasn't involved, because they were. This is a corporate plan, as I said, for 8 years with only 7 Conservatives putting their input into it. I would, if I had the time, be able to actually ask each of them in turn what their input was, and then we'll be doing that at a later stage. So what consultation is there at this stage? Come to Cabinet. I appreciate you've said it's going to go to full council, but this is already a public document. You say it's a living document, but it doesn't say that within this document before us. So my questions are, why is there only the 7 of you actually been involved at this stage? And what will be the consultation with members besides from actually a debate at full council, which, as you're fully aware, becomes more party political, whereas a workshop is not. A workshop is much more consensus building. Thank you, Chair.
This is a recommendation to go to council for presentation and and discussion. It's quite a high level. It's not at the detailed level of a workshop. Any other questions before we move into the debate? Councillor Whitehead.
I just feel for the record that this cabinet is not 7 Conservative members, but it's 6 Conservatives and 1 proud independent. And that should be a note in the record, I think.
Yes. Yes, you're quite right. And this is an administration plan. I have got just one thing I would like to change, which is Section 12. I would like to see added onto that list of background documents our IT strategy and also our joint local plan. The joint local plan is referenced elsewhere, but it's crucial that our emerging joint local plan is listed. You may try, yes.
Just a very technical question. At Section 10 is environmental implications.
Sorry,
Section 10
Section 10, yes.
is environmental implications, but legal implications and financial implications are further earlier on in the document. I ask that in future for any reports, it's got financial implications, then legal implications, then environmental, and then you lead on to the rest of the report. It's just rather than tacking on environmental implications at the end. Do you see what I mean? The actual report layout.
I'm happy to go and talk about that with our democratic services, but these templates are already set up in modern.gov, but I will discuss it with them. Councillor Fleming.
And this also is about number 10, environmental implications. This question maybe for you, Arthur. In the past, environmental implications, this whole paragraph has been to see whether whatever is the subject of the report might have a negative impact on the environment. It's to pick things up that, might be overlooked. Am I wrong in that? So I think what we're doing here, or what Councillor Eburn is seeking to do, is to actually change the context of use of this whole paragraph. I'm putting this out because I don't have enough experience to know where the environmental implications paragraph originated from or why. But I think it would be quite useful to understand that. And if we are changing it to understand and moving its position, then it has a different context in the whole document assessment process.
With all of those sections, whether it's the environmental implications or the financial implications and such like, it's not so much necessarily a case of saying, are there negative implications of this approach? It's simply asking the question of, when looked at specifically the financial aspect or when looked at specifically the environmental aspect, what are the potential implications of taking this approach? And you would expect that, for example, if there were significant negative or positive implications in relation to any of those, then how they may or may not be mitigated accordingly, particularly obviously if those were negative ones. So in relation to the environmental implications, the reason why it's saying there are no immediate environmental implications from adopting the approach, from adopting the corporate plan, is because all this is in that regard is adopting the corporate plan. The implications clearly would flow through from the environment strategy, as the leaders referred to, and the task force work that would follow later. Equally, you could turn it the other way around, and you could say that there are some environmental implications by virtue of adopting this corporate plan, given that the environment has a strong component part within the corporate plan itself. But clearly it's impossible at this stage to really flesh out, as the leader has said, the detail that sits beneath.
Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, perhaps I can throw a little bit of light on where environmental implications came from. It was something that the previous administration, I think in particular myself, and it came out of a workshop or a little task force, task and finish group, that suggested environmental implications should form a part of every report, which it now does. At that time, we did put together a guidance document for officers that indicated what it was we expected them to consider when answering this particular question. So that guidance document presumably still exists and is accessible if members would like to see a copy of it. I'm sure Arthur could sort that out for us. I just also wanted to say to Councillor Eburn that whilst it is certainly true that there's not been any direct consultation with the public regarding the revised corporate plan, I point out that we are all in contact with our residents, all the members of the Cabinet, and we talk to them. That's the indirect consultation that has gone into it. It is informed not just by the opinions of the individual Cabinet members, but by their informed view on their community's needs and requirements. Thank you.
Just to confirm in relation to the question from Councillor Byrne, yes, you're absolutely right. There is a guidance document and a checklist that's used or applied when looking at how to complete the sections within the reports, specifically around environmental implications. That's right.
And can we see that? Sorry, Madam Chairman, if I might just come back.
Absolutely.
And see that,
Yeah,
please.
absolutely.
Is this then a joint corporate plan? And is that how it should be referred to?
Yes, it's certainly been produced as being a joint corporate plan for Mid-Suffolk and for Baber jointly in that regard, yes.
I've got a proposer and a seconder. Can I have a show of hands in favour? All against? All abstain?
Carried.
Carried, thank you. Item 9, MCA 19/22, is the Botesdale and Rickinghall Neighbourhood Plan. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. The report before you today updates Cabinet on the progress of the Botesdale and Rickinghall Neighbourhood Plan and sets out two recommendations. One, that the Parish Council modify their plan in accordance with examiner recommendations, and two, subject to satisfactory completion of the above, the plan be advanced to a referendum. Now, this report follows the same format as others that have come before Cabinet in recent months, but with the examiner's modifications of note now moved to paragraph 4.5. Paragraph 4.14 reminds us that if this plan receives a majority yes vote at the local referendum, the District Council is obliged to adopt this neighbourhood plan as part of our development plan framework. I can also report that officers are now working with the Parish Council and that this plan is being modified in accordance with the examiner's report. That work should be completed soon. In other words, the Parish Council are addressing the first recommendation. This Botesdale and Rickinghall neighbourhood plan becomes the 7th such plan in Mid-Suffolk to be presented to members for approval and go forward to a local referendum. I commend this plan to you and ask that Cabinet endorse the recommendations set out in the report. Thank you.
May I call for a seconder? Councillor Fleming, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Whitehead.
I might be wrong, but I think previous neighbourhood plans have been single parish neighbourhood plans, where this involves more than one parish. Am I right in thinking that there'll be obviously separate ballot boxes, but when they're counted, they'll all be mixed together, so it'll be not clear? Because it's 1 plus 50% and that needs to pass this plan, but it won't be clear to anyone in terms of how the various parishes have voted, will it?
I think I can answer that, but I will get one of our officers to confirm that it will be a referendum of all residents within the neighbourhood area as designated, which therefore means that it will be, yes, maybe two polling stations, 2 ballot boxes, but all the votes will be counted together. But I'll check on that. Is that right?
So can I just ask, in which case, what if everybody from one parish votes and everybody from another parish doesn't?
Provided 50% or 51% of the total votes cast, even if all those votes come from one of the 2 parishes, then the plan will be put forward for making at the next parish council meeting, at the next full council meeting.
Does anybody have... Councillor Brewster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think my question probably more or less sort of mirrors yours, but not quite. Following a referendum, when the neighbourhood plans come back to council, we receive details of the percentage vote in favour or against. Although it would make no difference, I wonder if for information in future we could receive details of turnout for the just to provide complete transparency.
Yes.
I think the answer to that is yes. Thank you.
Yes, we can. I'll talk to electoral services colleagues, and we'll arrange it so that you'll see the total yes/no vote and the breakdown as requested.
Thank you.
Councillor Byrne.
Well, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have actually shown turnout in some of the returns so far, have we not?
So when we declare the results of the neighbourhood plan referendum, it's the total number of yes votes, no votes, other votes cast, and also details of the number of people who vote and therefore the percentage of turnout against the electorate. So that is on the declaration results, and as Councillor Brewster's asked, we'll try and separate that between Botesdale and Rickinghall as well.
Thank you. So I've got a proposer and a seconder. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Show of hands against? Carried. Item 10, MCA 19/23, Development of Building Services Business Plan. Councillor Flatman.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move recommendations 3.1 and 3.2 and 3.3. Just an introduction to the report. I refer you to MCA 19/23. The performance and success of building services is an organisational priority. When tenants consider great service, they generally relate it to their home. A good, speedy repair service is seen as the most important and significant reason to rate their service from a social housing provider as great. As members, we have set the expectation that the building service is high performing, delivering a high quality service which provides value for money. However, our current service does not always meet these expectations. There may never be a good time to review the service, but it is important that we plan ahead. We must consider whether the service we offer is financially sound and others the best service provision to our residents. We need to consider the options there are of providing building services in an alternative way to help us meet the challenges we may face in the future. There are local and national challenges we must consider. Local challenges include the financial pressures in maintaining and delivering services and the views and opinions of our residents, captured through the 2019 survey of tenants and residents. National challenges, such as the residents' expectations or the likelihood of significantly more regulation in the future. The Social Housing Green Paper and the Hackett Review, a report commissioned by the government following the tragic Grenfell Tower fire to make recommendations on the future regulatory system, must also be considered. We are keen to learn from others to accelerate the progression of the service. As a result, this paper sets out a timetable to develop a business case which explores the opportunity of developing a joint venture to delivering building services with Flagship Housing, which, if agreed today, would see a robust business case be presented to our Cabinet in the spring of 2020. I wish to propose the recommendations set out in 3.1 and 3.2 of the report and would ask for a seconder.
And a seconder? Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to see this initiative coming forward, and therefore I'm very happy to second the recommendations.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Fleming.
I've got two questions. Just the first is a point of clarity, really. In paragraph 2.3, the end of the first sentence, and then which refers to two possible options, outsourcing the service or finding an alternative partner, with both of which have been discounted because there are no immediate opportunities. Can the officer just confirm that the first option, which would favour exploring the opportunities that a joint venture would create to deliver building services, is not exclusive of the discounted option referred to in paragraph 2.3. I just want to make sure there's no conflict in language there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Flatman. In answer to your question, the options considered, there were a number of options that we've considered before presenting to Cabinet today, the preferred option of developing a joint venture with Flagship Housing. So those options are just a continuation of the current service in its current form. And obviously, you'll be aware of some of the reasons why we don't feel that that is beneficial to do that right now, based on the financial pressures around delivering that service, and just the speed of change in terms of the amount of work that we want to do and carry out to improve the service that residents receives. And by doing that on our own, it's going to take longer. In the report under 4.20, there's a table which just sets out at a high level the options. So option 1 was the continuation of the current service. Option 2 is outsourcing. And outsourcing is something that historically has been in vogue at certain periods of time. But outsourcing we've ruled out because A, the market and market conditions don't lend itself to...
I understand all that.
Okay.
I think the answer probably I'm asking for is very short. And it's just to be clear that what we're actually recommending is to explore the opportunities a joint venture would create to deliver building services. That's fine. But at the same time, we are, by implication, ruling out any other partner other than Flagship. Is that correct? I'm just looking for clear language here.
Okay, yes, that's
because
correct.
You have implied in 2.3 that to finding an alternative partner to enter into a joint venture with. An alternative partner to whom? And in 3.1, we don't say we are looking to explore opportunities to create a joint venture with Flagship. And I think that's probably what we mean. I just wonder if you could clarify that.
Yeah, apologies for any confusion. With regards to the options, there is the option of joint venture, and in the report under 4.20, there are the two options of a joint venture with Flagship, which we've defined as our preferred option, and a joint venture with any other public partner. And the reason we've ruled out that is because we don't have a relationship with anyone, and no one has presented as being a suitable partner at this stage.
Our recommendation 3.1 is to explore the opportunities that a joint venture with Flagship would bring. That's what it should say then, really. Okay, no, thank you for that. I've got one more question, and that is in paragraphs 4.22 and 4.23. Can you explain, what's meant there, please?
Can you just say that again?
Page 25, paragraphs 4.22 and 4.23. Could you explain what that means, those paragraphs mean?
Yeah, certainly. It just explains who Flagship Group are, and Flagship are made up of a number of subsidiaries. So the reference to RFT is what was known as Right First Time, and is their repairs and maintenance arm of the business. So when we refer to Flagship Group, the joint venture would be with Flagship Group, but they do have a number of separate entities that we may contract with through the joint venture. So in addition to RFT, which is repairs and maintenance, for example, they have a subsidiary called Gasway, which provides their repairs and gas servicing.
Okay, no, just wasn't sure. They hadn't been introduced before, so we thought maybe it was a typographical error. I think we could just, for the record, clarify that RFT service is part of the Flagship Group, because it isn't apparent from the paper. Thank you.
Yes, we'll do that. I have a question regarding, so the table on 4.20, you've got options 1 to 4 there, but we're only looking at option 3. Options 1, 2 and 4 have been discounted. And we're talking about Flagship Group are picking up the costs for the business case. But at the bottom of page 26, so Flagship are creating a business case that tells us that we ought to be having a joint venture with them. But at the bottom of page 26, if we don't go with what they recommend, we have to pay for it.
So in answer to the question, Chair, the development of the business case will be a joint piece of work between Baber, Mid-Suffolk and Flagship. It's going to be, the business case is about a joint venture, and so therefore that work will be developed in cooperation. So that will be people like myself and colleagues in building services working with colleagues from Flagship Housing. And we will develop a business case, one business case for consideration by Baber Cabinet and Mid-Suffolk Cabinet next year, and by Flagship's board. There are costs in regards to, they are going to provide officer assistance for 2 days per week between now and the development of the business case. There may be a small cost if, for example, in 2 months' time we said, actually, we don't want to consider this business case any further. We've changed our mind for whatever reason. Then there would be some costs incurred just from an officer time from their perspective. But that's the only cost in regards to Flagship Housing.
This says will incur Flagship Group costs. Do you mean cost to them?
Yeah, their officer time, if they're deployed an officer into our organisations for 2 days a week to develop the business case alongside me, if in 2 months' time we decide that we didn't want to do that, then there'd be a cost implication in terms of their officer time that's been invested in the business case. In terms of development of the business case, that's obviously not something that we would be considering. We're in this to develop a business case and present a business case to members next year. I would expect the cost to be minimal anyway.
think for clarity and transparency, I would like to see that quantified. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I think two members of the Cabinet had questions, but do you want to take the Cabinet questions before me? Sorry?
Thank you, Chair. In fact, I had my hand up before you asked your question, but Leader's Prerogative, and you've asked most of it. But it was clarification of this point about were any of the business development costs at Flagship's own risk, which would be quite a normal thing going into an arrangement like this. And the only, in the answer you've given, and I hear that the only costs are those related to officer time that they are providing. There are no other costs, business development costs that they're occurring that we might be liable for in terms of that. And my second question was not to be pessimistic, but if this doesn't work out, what's the plan?
Okay, so in answer to that question, as part of development of the business case, there's a need to sign non-disclosure agreements and there's a need to sign a memorandum of understanding. In regards to that memorandum of understanding, there is there's a figure of £10,000 for which we would have to reimburse if we didn't proceed with the joint venture. But that is not proceeding with a joint venture based on what is presented as a sound business case. So actually the cost to Mid-Suffolk is £5,000. I see that as a small amount of money in comparison to the commitment that Flagship are going to provide. Flagship will be providing officer time in relation to supporting myself and colleagues to write the business case. But there's also the added value. So over the next few months, we'll be working with the Flagship group around a whole range of challenges that we currently face. So, for example, one of those may be around the fact that we need to procure a new fleet for that building services ready for next year. They have a fleet manager. We may take soundings from them about how they've procured their fleet, the type of vehicles they're using. Are they using electric? What are the challenges that they've found using electric? For an example. So actually we're going to get a lot of added value from that relationship. In terms of your second question, in terms of what next if the joint venture doesn't equate to a sound business case, well, the what next is a continuation of the service in its current form, and that work will continue whilst the business case is being developed. And I want to stress that the business case is an isolated piece of work that will go on in the background. The priority for me is to continue to provide the service residents expect and demand. And you can see from the satisfaction results that we're not always getting it right, and satisfaction is reducing. So we will continue with an action plan to improve the service, because if the joint venture isn't sound, then we've still got to deliver that service. So I don't want to be 6 or 9 months behind where I could be in terms of developing the service, developing the culture, and developing some of the actions that we've got around, whether it be health and safety or the way that we deliver the business. So, for example, the scheduling software, which will enable the customer access point to give a customer a precise time and day when the repair will be carried out, will continue and will be implemented later this year, because it's the right thing to do and it improves the business going forward.
Councillor Flatman.
Yes, Councillor Fleming has just wants clarification on the recommendations here, because it says that a business case is developed by officers which explores the opportunities of a joint venture. Then on the table for proposed timeline, we've got October 2019, Feb 2020. Flagship will support the service and develop a draft business case with officers from Baber and Mid-Suffolk. And she's just worried that the two are conflicting. Well, the recommendation, 3.1, and over on the table for proposed timeline, and the October 2019, Feb 2020. And it says Flagship will support the service and develop of a draft business case. So she's just worrying that it looks as if it's a conflict of interest there.
Can I just clarify? My concern is who's developing the business case? Is it Flagship or us?
It's joint.
And if Flagship is to be the firm we work with, is it right that they'd also develop the business case?
So you're asking exactly the same questions that I asked, and I can absolutely understand the concern, which is they would say that, wouldn't they? I suppose is the risk. Having said that, that would be the case if we were solely asking somebody to provide a business case as to why they should work with us. That isn't the case. This is being done jointly. There is as much chance at the end of this process that Flagships say, this doesn't work for us, and they walk away, as there is as that you might say, this doesn't work for us, and we walk away. So there is equal stake in that regard. Clearly, they're not going to enter into something that doesn't work for them in the same way that you won't enter into something that doesn't work for you. I think just coming back to a question Councillor Gould asked earlier as well, in terms of if not this, then what? It depends what the outcome of this is, to be perfectly honest, because if this demonstrates that the model, and I don't like to get hung up on models, but if it demonstrates that the model of a joint venture is the correct one, but the business working relationships are such, or the mechanics are such that it doesn't work with Flagship, then I would say, and I wouldn't use this expression normally, but plan B would be to look for an alternative joint venture. If the answer comes back and says, actually the model's wrong for whatever reason, then clearly that wouldn't be the option. So it's not a helpful answer, I know, but the answer is it depends. But just to give some reassurance, this is us in conjunction with Flagship jointly developing a business case that needs to work ultimately for us and for them, so that there is no conflict of interest there. That's why the financial position is such that, yes, there's some risk that they're taking, but they're not entirely taking it and we're not paying for it, because again, that would be even more concerning, if you like, in the sense that we're paying somebody to produce something that you know what's going to say in that regard. That isn't the case.
So if they walk away, do we still pay their costs?
No, so in answer to that, if Flagship were to walk away or decide that it wasn't a joint venture for them, there's no cost to us incurred by their time in that regard.
Can we have some corrected language in 3.1 for the recommendation that reflects the case that a business case would be developed jointly by the district and Flagship? That explores the opportunities a joint venture with Flagship would create. And then I think that accurately describes the paper. But I think the confusion is set in because the recommendation doesn't match the content of the paper well.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Flatman? Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I was with Councillor Fleming on that case. I think it's not completely clear that, and I would, if I was you, I would add extra to that, because my question was going to be, what is the cost capped at? Because the paper, the recommendation at the moment, you could spend hundreds of thousands, on developing. I know Arthur's smiling and would love probably hundreds of thousands to spend on proposals, but I would suggest you is that, but I'm not the cabinet anyway. My questions really are staff. My concern, I appreciate this is a paper that's asking for your approval to move to a joint venture, which then will suggest something, for you to agree. But, we've got a lot of staff working here, and I've just got a big concern that their roles are protected and that we work well with them throughout this process. So I've just got a fear about that and wanting to look after our staff here. And secondly, just my common question about our housing stock is, can we ensure that whatever we're doing we ensure that we are moving towards making sure every single home we have is fully insulated and therefore can provide tenants with the cheapest heating possible. And just finally, again, on the environmental implications, it says there aren't any. I suspect there'd be absolutely loads, but, that's something I think might need to be looked at in the future. Thank you very much, Chair.
I think the point about capping the costs is a good one. Gavin, you mentioned 10,000. Would that be an appropriate cap?
Yeah, so the cost wouldn't be any more than £10,000, so the cap is 10,000. In answer to the other question from Councillor Eburn, staff are paramount in this, in terms of having an understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and being involved in the development of that. Whilst this was a cabinet paper coming to you today, conscious that it would be in the public domain, and to give staff that transparency, we actually held an event at the Holiday Inn in Ipswich 2 weeks ago, where we had everyone there to talk about where the service was, where it was going, and the reasons why we were considering a joint venture. And as part of that, we're developing, as a result, a team charter. We're developing some work around the results of staff survey, and actually working with officers to understand how they want to be best kept informed, updated, and involved in the development of the business case. And that work's already begun in the last 2 weeks. I think the third question was around the environment. I think it's the point that this report, there are no environmental implications of the decision making in this. Yes, there will be naturally environmental implications from looking at the capital and planned maintenance programme, and the amount of investment that we have to spend, and how we best spend that in reducing fuel poverty and improving our homes. So I would expect that to be a part of the business case going forward.
I was just going to add to what Kevin said, and just to repeat what he said earlier. So that £10,000 cap is for the entirety of the work. So for Mid-Suffolk, that cap is £5,000, because obviously the work is across the 2 districts. And the other element is in relation to the staffing specifically, part of the work that we'd expect to now happen in terms of, is there a potential here for a joint venture, and how might that look and how might that work, is exactly that staffing question as to would the staff cheaply transfer to somewhere, or would they remain on our books, and exploring all of those opportunities. But just to give you some reassurance, the law fully protects our staff in that regard, come what may, in terms of their terms and conditions. But clearly that would be worked through as part of the work, if approved today, in terms of exactly what that would look like or could look like.
Councillor Whitehead.
I think Arthur's almost introduced the sort of question that was in my head, because my understanding is BMBS was created by amalgamating Baber's external workforce with Mid-Suffolk's internal workforce. So those two are two paying in, presumably with a flagship group employees two paying in, and then presumably new employees that come into the new organisation will have their own new terms and conditions. So it does sound like there could be, for a relatively small organisation, a tremendous variety of terms and conditions. So I'm assuming that HR are going to be very much involved day in, day out through this process.
Yes. This is short answer. You're speculating on what that might look like in the same way that I speculated in terms of what that might look like. That all needs to be worked through in terms of what that could actually be, yes, and keeping it simple.
Councillor Field.
Thank you. I notice in 421, paragraph 421, there's quite a bit of information there about the size of flagship group, the number of homes, etc., and its Moody ratings, etc. There's nothing about RFT itself. I wonder just how substantial they are. They presumably maintain 28,000 homes, but it might be more or less. So what sort of size are they compared with our own business? Do they rate really well, or you know, our ratings have been reducing? Are theirs doing the same, or are they doing well? That will be certainly interesting. The other point I was concerned about is, have we any view yet as to what this joint venture would look like? It's a joint venture with Flagship to set up a new area. I think that was just a question. Or is it to, we're essentially buying into their Operation RFT? And on that, with those thoughts in mind, have we got any idea of what sort of capital investments we'd be needing to make? Yeah. Do they make, we've got 6,000 homes, do they make 28,000 parts or whatever, and we make 6,000 parts of all future capital investments? What happens if there's a profit or a loss from the business? Do we, how do we carry that? Is that all part of the business case, which is as yet to be determined?
Okay, thanks to you, Councillor Field, for those questions. Just picking up some of the points. RFT provide repairs and maintenance services to the flagship group, so they're therefore providing repairs and maintenance to up to 28,000 homes. RFT were developed and introduced about 7-8 years ago, and I think it's fair to say that in the beginning there were challenges in delivering that service for flagship through RFT, and not everything went right on day one. I think when we were looking at our preferred partner, there is an acknowledgement that actually they've been on a very similar journey to the one that we find ourselves on now, but they find themselves 6-7 years down the road. So actually, if they've potentially made mistakes along the way, actually they're not going to make those again. So actually we'll benefit from their knowledge and expertise in a way that we can't do on our own. In terms of RFT and them providing services, it's not for me to sit here and talk about RFT and the services they provide. What I can do is reassure you that as part of the recent STAR survey, one of the questions that we asked residents was to give us a Net Promoter Score. And a Net Promoter Score is recognised, it's an industry standard across a whole range of different public and private sectors. Our Net Promoter Score, so that's for every person that would promote you as a good landlord versus everyone that would have a negative or adverse experience of you and would promote you negatively. Our Net Promoter Score was 20. RFT and Flagship are operating with a Net Promoter Score of 40, 45 plus at the moment. So I think that shows you that actually they're delivering services that are receiving far higher and far greater levels of satisfaction than we are providing at now. Obviously, some of the benefits of a joint venture would be the economies of scale. So in comparison, we're relatively small, but for example, we procure materials from the same supplier, and we've historically been looking at the types of materials that Flagship Group use in comparison to our own in terms of quality and costs. So actually through the joint venture there could be significant economies of scale in terms of buying more widgets in that regard, as well as the other benefits, and one that I've talked to members about historically, in that in the two districts there are nearly 7,000 Baber or Mid-Suffolk council homes. In those same streets, you will find homes owned by Orwell Housing, by Flagship Group, by Suffolk Housing and others. And actually the economies of scale come from the joint venture long term, where actually it could be that an officer might go into a Baber home or a Mid-Suffolk home and repair the bath, but the very next visit be going into a Flagship home, because why is it, there's no sense in staff travelling from Norfolk down to repair a property when we've got staff locally as well. So there are benefits. You'll notice that obviously part of the development of the business case is those financials, and those financials need to be sound for us and for Flagship Group. I don't have those financials to present to you today because this is very early stage. This is just a commitment to developing a business case over the next few months.
Yeah, just a quick one and a small one, a point of clarification, I think. If we are going to change the wording of recommendation 3.1, might we please lose the initial capitals on joint venture? I don't see what that tells us. It elevates, I mean, we all know what joint venture is if you're going to be talking about Flagship within that recommendation anyway. It's obvious. And I think capital initial is elevated to give it a meaning that I can't interpret. So I'd soon have them lost. Thank you.
One last question. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. Do you envisage that the joint venture might operate outside of the Flagship area? And is this a joint venture with RFT? If so, where do Blue Flame and I think you said Gasway fit into that? because I can't get a feel for who you're joining with, and if RFT have other contracts, might the Mid-Suffolk Baber staff, or the present Mid-Suffolk Baber staff, be operating somewhere in Hertfordshire because RFT have got some work in Hertfordshire? It seems to it could grow into a big thing, with our people a very small part of it.
So in answer to that question, the joint venture would be with Flagship Group. Flagship Group own a number of subsidiaries or tackle companies, and part of the development of the business case will be to develop what that joint venture looks like as a legal entity, because obviously there is a legal process that we'd have to go through, and which companies would form part of that joint venture. So I can't sit here today to say it would be any one of Flagship subsidiaries, other than to say it would be with the Flagship Group, and as we develop the business case we might find that there are benefits of the joint venture encompassing other parts of the Flagship Group, but there's some legal and technical questions that we will need to explore as we develop the business case. In answer to your other question, it depends on what the joint venture looks like in terms of the business case and what we ultimately achieve from this. So yes, I've described a situation where an officer may be repairing a Baber Mid-Suffolk property and then repairing a Flagship property. Yes, Flagship Group own housing across the whole of East Anglia. So yes, I guess there could be the opportunity that officers may work in different areas. But we shouldn't lose sight that actually we've got nearly 7,000 council homes that have to be maintained, have to be repaired, have to be improved, and therefore the workforce will be predominantly solely focused on that, and efficiencies are gained through working in new ways.
So I'm looking at rewording paragraph 3.1 to insert the word jointly after is developed, and after by officers to insert of Baber and Mid-Suffolk District Councils and Flagship Group, so that it reads that a business case is developed jointly by officers of Baber and Mid-Suffolk District Councils and Flagship Group, which explores the opportunities a joint venture, in lowercase, would create to deliver building services. Happy with that, councillors? Are you all right with that, Gavin? Okay. And I'll just take advice on how to word the paragraph about capping the costs at 10,000, or where that should appear.
Effectively, I think you are saying that those costs will be capped, and you've had that indicated already by the relevant officers in terms of the agreement that's in place. So that would be within the minutes that the costs are capped at £10,000 in total for the two districts. You could include it within recommendations if you wish, but I would suggest the minutes are probably sufficient.
Have a show of hands in favour. Unanimous, thank you, carried. Item 11. So we're looking at exclusion of the public, which term includes the press, to consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below, on the grounds that if the public were present during these items, it is likely that there would be the disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against each item. The authors of the report proposed to be considered in Part 2 of the agenda are satisfied that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I propose, can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brewster, thank you.
Happy to second, Madam Chairman.
Need to vote.
need to vote.
You need to vote to move into
Oh,
confidential
sorry.
session.
A show of hands to... Thank you. next meeting is Monday the 4th of November. Thank you very much, councillors. Meeting closed at 3:43.
Susie? Susie?